Imagine you pick up the phone, and on the other end of the line, you hear a family member's voice, and they are asking for help. They say they've been arrested. They say there's been some mistake, and they need your help. They need money from you, whether it's to post bail or for other things, right? And maybe you've heard about something like this similar happening in the past, but here's the thing. It's someone who's calling, but they don't have the voice of your daughter. They don't have the voice of your son. They're trying to dupe you. But imagine you get that type of call, and the voice on the other end of the line is your son's voice, is your daughter's voice. You could swear on it that that's your daughter on the other end of the line. It sounds just like them, so you trust them. And suddenly you've been tricked into giving them thousands of dollars. It is happening right now. Several people, including seniors, who have been tricked by a new artificial intelligence voice cloning technology. Carmi Levy is here, CTV's tech analyst, to tell us a little bit more. Carmi, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back, Elias. Thanks for having me.
So there have been scams forever, right? And especially targeting the elderly when it comes to trying to separate elderly people from their money, and, using family members, using loved ones in help is always a great way to prey on someone's emotions here. This, however, this is different here. Tell us about the technology side of this.
What's different about this one is now they're using voice cloning, as you said, or voice spoofing technology to essentially recreate your loved one's voice. So it's one thing if you get a call and it's like, I'm here with your granddaughter at the police station and they've been arrested and you need to come and bail them out. Bring $2,000 and I'll tell you where to go to drop off the money, or I'll even come to your house to pick it up and I'll take care of it for you. But it's quite another when you get the call and it's not just them telling you they're at the police station, but you actually hear your granddaughter's voice saying, Grandma, I'm at the police station and you've got to come and bail me out. That's a whole other level of engagement, and that's a whole other level of emotional involvement. At that point, are you going to say no? Most grandparents would be, of course, I'm going to drop everything, whatever I can do to help my grandchild, because this proves that that's actually them. I'm hearing their voice. But the scary thing here is these tools are getting so much more sophisticated, and it doesn't take much. Microsoft released a tool that can train a voice synthesizer in 3 seconds. In other words, if they can find 3 seconds of someone's voice online, they can feed that into the software, and then they can basically have it say in that person's voice anything they want for as long as they want. So think about 3 seconds. Everyone posts videos to YouTube. We can all be clones, and it's not that hard. So it's scary because it adds another level of fidelity to it. You absolutely are convinced it's real, even though we know it's not. But in the moment, you think it's real. And, of course, in many cases, people are, without checking further, they're pulling out their wallets, pulling out their credit cards, and away goes the money, never to be seen again.
If they can do it with 3 seconds of audio, Carmi, what can they do with a radio host who has hundreds of hours of his audio online? Okay, so basically, this is the progression here of artificial intelligence technology. We have now reached at least this, and I know I've seen some other things showing fake videos and fake photos, but it's not perfect. We've reached this point now that the technology is getting close to perfect, at least on audio.
It is. And I mean, if you listen really closely, if you do a deep dive analysis of the audio, you can hear that it isn't quite perfect, that it doesn't flow quite as well. The words, they feel almost staccato. And so it's just like when you look at a heavily photoshopped photo, you can see the artifacts, you know that it's been played with, and so the same thing applies to audio. It's not quite there yet. But here's the thing, Elias, is that most of us aren't really taking the time to do that deep analysis. When you think that your grandchild or your close family member is in trouble, you're probably not going to say, whoa, hang on a second. Let me slow things down so that I can then do this deep analysis to verify that the voice is, in fact, what I think it is. Mm-hmm. Your emotions are taking over. You will overlook that. You don't see those small artifacts. You don't hear the small kind of glitches in the sound that betray the fact that it's still not quite legit. So, it doesn't have to be perfect in order to convince us that we've got a problem here. And that's sort of the thing, is that we answer the phone most of the time, and we're not answering cynicism first. In other words, prove to me when you call me that you are legit, and then we will have the conversation. We're just taking it at face value, and because we're taking it at face value, we're probably not filtering as best as we could. It's probably a lot easier to fool us into doing what the criminals want us to do.
We're with Carmi Levy, CTV's tech analyst. And now, Carmi, it's one thing to use a little bit of social manipulation, right, in order to affect one of these scams. But I bet you most of our listeners here deal with a bank that is also using some sort of voice ID technology. I recently dealt with a Canadian bank, and when you call in, they tell you, hey, we're going to be recording your voice and using it in the future to verify you, okay? And we've already seen reports that this same type of technology, this artificial intelligence voice cloning technology, has successfully been used by people to call up banks and gain access to accounts. Do we need to maybe tap the brakes or stop entirely voice ID now as a type of verification method?
We can't. As much as we wish we could say, hey, let's just pull the plug on this because it isn't fully proven. The sad reality is it's out there, and these systems are being installed whether we like them or not. What we should do as customers of banks and as citizens in broader society is we should demand that our banks use more than just voice recognition in order to gain access. In other words, use multi-factor authentication, not just one lock on the virtual front door, but multiple locks, so that if the criminals manage to use a doctored voice to get in, that there's another layer of security. There's a PIN, there's a fingerprint reader, there's a password, there's something else, challenge security questions, so that they might have broken one lock, but they're not going to break all of them. And I think that it's also on us when we look at how we've set up the security on our bank accounts, and each one of us has to sort of have that responsibility. Look at how you set it up, because in many cases we have the choice to add dual or multi-factor authentication. Most of the time we don't. Most of the time we're not required to, but we should. That way, if one of those technologies is not perfect, and voice cloning is absolutely not, at least there's a backup to save the day.
Carmi, as we talk, I have a listener who writes in, well, the cause of this is lack of education or senility, right? It's not a clone voice. And let me tell you something. I've seen one of these stories of a senior, and they are as lucid and bright and sharp as any of us. And they are like, I swear to you, this voice was my daughter's. Are some people here underestimating just what this technology can do right now?
They are, and I think we need to be really careful to sort of think, oh, well, it simply targets senior citizens, so that's fine. Everyone else need not worry. No, victims exist across the demographic spectrum. Everybody can be victimized. I have heard stories from victims ranging from their teens all the way through to their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I've, in fact, had some of them literally walk up to my house asking for help. So this is not a senior citizens issue. It's often framed in that way, but let's be clear. All of us are potentially victimized by it. And in fact, many people who think that they're tech savvy can be fooled as well. So let's not lull ourselves into a sense of security because, well, I'm not old enough for this to be a problem. No, you can be any age. And that's a very dangerous assumption for us to make.
I'm telling you, Carmi, so many text messages on this subject here. And I have a note from a listener that might actually be some sage advice. I want your take on this. Listener writes, we should all have a safe word. So when someone calls and says, I need help, you ask your child, your supposed child, maybe if it's a scammer, the safe word.
That's a great idea, and in fact, make sure that it's a safe word or something that only you would know, that you have never shared with anyone else and that you have never shared online. Part of the problem is that we share so many details of ourselves online. We answer those memes and those surveys on Facebook, for example, where we share details of where we grew up and who our first kindergarten teacher was and what our mother's maiden name was. All of those are security challenge questions. And then, of course, scammers go online and they search our social media profiles looking for that information, which they then use in these kinds of attacks. And so if you are going to use a safe word, which is a great suggestion, by the way, make sure that it's something that has never been shared digitally before, and then go take a look at what you're sharing on social media. And if you are oversharing, start scrubbing that back. Delete things where you've crossed that line. It gives scammers a lot less ammunition to work with.
Oh, and I you know what I'm just thinking now? I'd ask a question that is like that they're expecting for you to answer in the affirmative, like, oh, isn't your best friend Rachel with you? And then when the scammer says yes, it's a dupe. It's something like that. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to to bail out on the conversation and say, okay, great. So my grandson Brandon is in jail. Okay, thanks. I'm going to go call him now and just verify with him. So break the call and then call them directly, because of course they'll be perfectly fine. They won't be in jail, but don't take their word for it. You do your own. Contact them directly.
It's listen, it's a scam that's been happening forever, but now with the voice technology, if you could swear that it's your son or daughter, right, it makes it all the more tricky. Carmi, thanks so much. We've got to leave it there.
Great being here live.